Give just a moment to make sure that the stream is up and connected well and that everyone can hear me. So if you're in chat, toss an emoji in, toss anything into the chat. Let's double check. Perfect. All right. So we had this event and live stream planned. We'll give everyone like a minute or two more to join. But just to double check, everyone's able to hear me, correct? Hey, Padre. It is actually great to finally see you hop into a live stream. So, I know that you keep a busy schedule and making these are not easy. Ooh, if I chat over here. So we can go ahead and get started. If you have questions, put them into the chat. I'll be responding to them. And yeah, this is always meant to, we're an indie studio. We're meant to just have that back and forth conversation as we explore and show everyone what we're up to, what we've been developing. So let's get started here. So today is a developer update for the project called Fractured Online. If you are unfamiliar with Fractured Online, it's had quite a history. And we have been focusing on relaunching Fractured Online, taking it in a similar but new direction, building upon features that the community has enjoyed over the past, as well as exploring new opportunities, new systems, bringing more of an RPG into this MMORPG sandbox. So today we are going to talk about a few areas in which we are focusing on for the team. And I say a few, when you look at the list, and there's 6 areas, and those are very gigantic areas, but I'll kind of categorize what phase they are in and how we are progressing along in those areas. So once again, thanks everyone for joining. So to start with, we are really working on the world, not just the world in its shape and biomes, different things like that, but also just a complete graphics update. So today I'll actually run around our first biome. It's not complete, but it's quite a far along in that journey. One of the sayings is perfection is the enemy of good, and we are moving to the second biome, and as we progress through the biomes, we'll circle back around and bring some of those new features and work on polish. And then the engine migration. So a lot of the troubles in the past around Fractured Online also stemmed from the previous networking layer, the company that had shut down, etc. Well, we have partnered with Coherence, and they have been great partners so far, and we continue to build that partnership better. This is our network layer, and some of these things are probably more detailed than most game studios would share, but we've had to completely rewrite all of the functionality and capabilities for Fractured Online into this new architecture, new language. Well, it's all still C#, but it all has to be rewritten. And with that brings a lot of complications, and a lot of time is spent on that. But it is the only way that Fractured Online would exist going forward. And that's been going great. Some of the core systems, very large systems, are still being migrated, and we'll keep everyone updated on that. And then the dynamic event system. So in this dynamic event system, it's how in a procedurally generated world that we have, and worlds, the content is actually shown to you. So you'll see this in some other games in which they generate planets, they generate like very large areas, and sometimes those areas can be very devoid of anything to do, points of interest or content. And it takes a whole nother system, not just to generate the terrain and the world, but it takes a very large dynamic system to be able to build content on top of that. And so we are focusing, it's actually the first edition of Fractured Online, which had just recently shut down. It had a lightweight version of an event system, and we're actually dedicating quite a bit of development time to this. We believe that for a studio our size, which we are an indie studio, and I just noticed the stream elements talking about giving a code out. Must be an old setting. But to provide content at a procedural scale, we need to have a really flexible system. So people like Hellcracks, where they design kind of the world and how the content exists inside of it, how that can be given to you. So an example would be, as we expand on these sandbox elements, if a particular group of players has built a settlement, for example, and that settlement is in an area that has particular mobs, how can the mobs react to that? What is their behaviors around that? Do they begin to, swarm the settlement periodically, or maybe perhaps there's, roaming bosses that spawn every so often in different areas. It's the system behind that allows for a lot more dynamic ways of interacting. Our kind of core philosophy, design pillar, whatever you want to call it, is that MMORPGs are first and foremost a social experience. Whether or not you're interacting directly with the player or you're running around them, a lot of people enjoy being in a world that is being shaped by players, and they can see players running around. And so we want to really build upon those things to build systems that can be tools for emergent gameplay. Some of these things were present in the first edition of Fractured Online, through the towns, through the PvP that was happening. And so this path forward for us is putting the tools and systems and structures in place to really give you the canvas to do that with, to be a little bit more free form in how players establish and make their mark on the world. That was a lot into the event system, but it is entering active development. We've been discussing design and what it would need. How do these things trigger? How can you have like more complex systems chained together? So we'll be sharing more of those, in the next month or so. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the building system in towns, we believe that after talking to many different people in the community and seeing other communities, not just in Fractured's, that there's quite a large group of players that really do enjoy that building of systems and towns, to have that modularity, to really shape their small corner how they want. And that can manifest itself in a player housing, or that can manifest itself in towns like we had in the first version. So we believe that as we move into this more modular building system and more free-form building, around the world, that it's important to constantly provide tools to shape your settlements, to shape your house in a way that could be unique to you. So the idea is that one settlement could have a different, not just visual, but layout than another. And we're not talking just building layouts like in the first Fractured Online. The idea is that you would have a functionality, and in that prefab, you could wrap it how you wanted. So it's not just, here's your market, place down market person, a couple tents. But how do you want to decorate or structure your area. So a question from chat from Elite Sheepy: does it have a level progression? And we are working through what that progression is. If you played the original Fractured Online, progression in towns really consisted of who you wanted to sacrifice to be farmers. And it wasn't the intention of that design, it was just where the design ended up, and they weren't able to expand on that farther. And so we want to be really careful in how we have like settlement progression going forward. It's not necessarily a easy path. If everyone has towns everywhere, then it means that you're forcing players into larger groups than perhaps they want to spend time with. So we're trying to figure out in the world where can we have areas that provide a unique value that maybe can't progress all the way to bigger towns. They have a purpose at a smaller scale for smaller groups. I think if anyone's seen me in chat in Discord, I'm a big proponent of providing multiple areas of play styles to larger groups, to smaller groups, and a good amount of content for solos. And so we're trying to find that balance. So yes, progression, but we're still figuring that out. I don't believe it will be farming on days on end like the previous. And then combat. Combat has went through quite a few design iterations already, but we're pretty solidly landing on drastically improving the previous combat. And what I mean by that is it took a long time when, talking to the team, it took a long time to get the combat in a way that felt good or okay. And when we compare to other games that are top-down, click combat, or even some WSD movement, that style of combat has quite a ways to go to feel impactful. There's a lot of things that can go into a skill or ability to make it feel like your character is appropriately performing and having impact. And that could be everything from new visual effects, as we're working with visual effects artists. It could be, sound design, and it can be the thematic tying to the archetype and classes. So we do plan on having the combat test at the end of Q3, and we'll keep everyone updated as we get closer around what does the timing look like for that. We recently just really started to get to a point where internally we are able to interact and have our back end in a way that can support porting some of these larger systems over. So we're well on our way. And so it will be, what does combat look like in the new setup with archetypes? And then gathering, processing, and crafting. MMOs and sandbox games often have a variety of ways that you gather, process, and craft. Fractured Online had one of the more unique ways that you would do that. The gathering and processing made the game feel immersive, where you were traveling across the land. Well, back then you were hoping not to die from PvP, but you were traveling across the land and you were collecting, some heavy materials in which you would cart or bring back to, put block by block, log by log to build your house or, various other things. And so we're really expanding out on what are the professions in Fractured Online that start from the base. How do we provide meaningful progression to gathering, to processing, and crafting, so that they all intertwine together, not that they become a chore, but they become a piece of your overall character progression. And what we landed on for the moment, we believe this is the direction forward, but we're always open to feedback, is that crafting, gathering, and processing, those professions are actually account bound. It will take some time to level on all of those different things, But we believe that through that, natural specialization and dependency on each other happens. If you have the time, you can level everything. But if you don't have the time, then you can engage in the social aspects of the game and, generate, more into that player-driven economy. So we will be opening up the designs for everyone to see soon on that. But first, we had to nail down a few other things, not just from a technical limitation, but from how the world is going to look, how our resources spread throughout, etc. Checking on chat. You were looking for a game like Tibia, and you enjoyed playing Enshrouded, then stumbled upon Fracture Online. I never actually played Tibia. I played Enshrouded for about 30 minutes, not because I didn't enjoy it, but there was another game that came out at the time, and I don't remember what it was, but I got lost in another game. So Enshrouded is a survival sandbox. So there's definitely elements that Fracture Online draws inspiration from in those genres. So if you take kind of the sandbox, which creates emergent gameplay for players and gives them tools to really build the world how they want, and you take the traditional MMO progression and systems, fishing and crafting, and you start to pair those together, it's a recipe for players to be able to, it's not a unique recipe, but our flavor, we do believe, will have a slight uniqueness to it. But MMOs have been doing some similar things for a long time. So we believe that you can take some of the best sandbox elements and the best systems and mechanics that MMOs bring, and then combine those into a really good social sandbox. And that's kind of our focus. If we have some systems like in previous, where you had two competing systems that of design that really forced you into isolation, and then some that forced you into group play, but they never really complemented or built upon each other, then we're failing in what we're doing. And we would hope that everyone would be yelling at us throughout that process. So everything that we do and every system that we do is making sure that we tie it together and that it complements, not contradicts. So yes, there are some things that we are pulling from the genres that those games are in. All right, hopping through. A little bit of development update around assets. So what I just talked about was really where we're focusing, and some of the high level like design philosophies, and there's still a lot that's underneath that I've not talked about and what's being designed and worked on. We're just not ready to share some of those things just yet. We want to get far enough along that we can collect feedback and really show the intent behind systems. Along this journey for relaunching Fracture Online, there has been the continued efforts to build with the community. Early on, we were enhancing some existing assets and taking the old armors and updating them, but keeping the core of what they were. Going forward, we're now moving into uncharted territories for Fracture Online. We're developing new armors, new things. And with that, we said from the beginning, we would do that with the community. So we actually put 4 poles up with 5 armors each, because we did make Mikhail draw again. We continue. And we really wanted to focus on giving players the ability to influence what they see in the game. And to start off with, the first was, and I put these in quotes because we haven't really nailed down the name of it, but we know the style and the tier in which this plays. So this is more of a thief type tier, meant to follow along a particular class, be a particular tier. And so the community actually voted and chose number 2 out of the 5. Now, like many, we internally were very surprised at the quality of these drawings and how much we really liked all of them. And so we're not discarding the others, but we are putting those to the side for the particular role that they play in the progression and crafting of those classes, like equipment. So we will likely see these others eventually over time, but we want to focus on making sure we can get all of the armors done for all of the tiers. And so for the thief-like set, the number 2 was chosen. I did see a couple questions in chat. He said, I'm afraid that the action combat will have tiny windows of reaction, like parries, where everyone with more than 100 milliseconds of delay is doomed. Throne and Liberty has, got some chat. Throne and Liberty has a lot of scripting problems with bots that react to skills and it uses blocks and parries immediately. I agree that does complicate things. And so we've really been spending a lot of time in the combat design space. We are an indie studio, and there are only so many things that we can do with the size of our team. And so while we wanted to go full action combat, we don't believe that that is actually the best way to get all of the systems to really give everyone the sandbox and tools to build the world in there. So we're actually taking a little bit of a step back, just giving you guys full transparency kind of behind where we are. And this is very recent, that we believe that we can do a bit of a combination and really build upon the existing combat system. Because if you look at other top-down games, they can feel very fluid, like you have the ability to dodge, like you have the ability to have that MOBA style combat or top-down. There's quite a few action combat games from a top-down perspective too. And so we are re-looking at our animations and our abilities and what does a basic attack mean going forward. In the past, basic attacks, I played a lot of melee. It was not very satisfying to sit there with a giant two-handed sword and swing on occasion. So we're trying to make all aspects of it more impactful. There will be more timing-based abilities, such as a dash out of the way, perhaps parrying, but it won't be full action combat either. We believe if we reuse some of the existing system, that we can put more development on others too. A lot of the feedback from the community was around other systems as well. So one of the things we don't want to do is ignore the feedback from the community and focus on something that maybe we wanted a little bit more. But we think that there's a happy medium. And that's the reason why you saw me put it as like Combat V2. It's enhancing the combat and trying to bring it together with a little bit more modern, look and feel of that. It's going to be one of the first things to be able to test. So we're hoping to get that going pretty quickly. Hopefully that answered your question, that there is going to be a happy medium that we're going to try to have. Regional servers is one way in which you can reduce ping, and before everyone lived on the same server. So we're looking at what is a design that allows multiple servers, even with this combat change. But what is that server setup? Perhaps it even allows you to cross over. So we're exploring what that looks like. Because one thing that I've always enjoyed in MMOs was being able to not only experience people in my time zones, as I'm often a night owl, I will play with other countries and other cultures and experience the people through that. And so it's not something that we want to lose either. We believe that there's a path forward on that. Hopefully that answered your question. The second out of the fourth set was the Scholar-like set. And the fourth one, I put the crown next to each one of these, is what won. To be fair, I also voted for this one too, so I was happy to see that one win. But they're all really good, to be honest. The third set, the Acolyte, I found this actually really interesting. When we saw this concept come through, it really gave a chance to highlight new the new character system, where we're able to have armor pieces that show, the character skin underneath. And I think, it was very interesting that number 2 went out, as it has more of a mask. It reminds me of some older games and illusionists and things like that. But this will allow the face to be more exposed with an interesting identity for this particular armor set. And then the warrior set, by far some of my most favorite sketches that have come out for armors. And number 2 won here as well, which is interesting. We had 3 number 2s and 1 number 4 in this. So I'm wondering if, there's something there. But I find number 1 very interesting as well. It has a lot more jagged edges, which you'll see kind of reminds you of the Warlord skin that Kickstarters were able to get. But these particular armors are being moved into development. So from concept into development within this next week. And Spalletta in chat, the other Acolyte concepts were more bishop-like, while the one looks like a traveling cleric, so it fits the theme. It does, unless you're trying to run a religious settlement in which you're starting a cult. Maybe, Spalletta, you want to be the bishop of a cult. So, kind of depends on what role you want to play. The other area, not only are we developing new and unplanned skins, but an aspect that's really near and dear to my own heart is that players who backed the Kickstarters see progression, that we are working towards some of those rewards. And so we originally put the concepts of all of these up, and we've actually begun development on these. So 3 of these are game ready, and we'll go through those. The first being the Warlord skin. So these are full body skins, not modular pieces. Concepts on the left and not in the game engine. So this is in the actual modeling software. We'll send some updates over the next week or 2 of them being in game. So you'll be able to see the post-processing, the lighting, and other ways that you see. So how does it react with night lighting, day lighting, different biomes and that side of the house. But this particular armor set was very interesting in the way that it came out. Like I said before, it was very cool to see armors that weren't full body, body gloves, and you could see actual muscles and things like that in the armor set. Very jagged edges. Definitely will be having this on for a period of time. Spalletta, I think you were really enjoying the Warlord concept, so I'm always curious on your opinion too. The Duke skin, by the way, these were voted on, and we developed those in accordance to the winning polls. So Warlord was first, Duke was second, which has more of a knight style. I think it adhered pretty well to its concept. And the imagery on the back of the cloaks, those are, and on the center crest, those are for mock-up. We hope to develop a system. I mean, it's in the plans, but it's all about when, that players in groups will be able to have, icons and represent their settlements, guilds, etc. So this is an example. While I really like this icon, it is an example. Surely we'll have it in there. Padre, love this one. It reminds me of the Excalibur film from the 70s and 80s. I would have to go back and watch that. All of the aka Toaster Head. Interesting. I did not see a toaster head until you mentioned that. So we'll definitely put you in a permanent Duke armor set and you can't get out of it. Give you a title of toaster. Spoletta the Warlord armor came out wonderfully. Now I just have to understand how to get one. Even the icon on the back looks perfect. We'll step back real quick because it is one of my favorites as well. So I really, yeah, right, I can't unsee the toaster helmet. I really enjoyed the ragged cloak. I can't think of the right words. But the cloak really sets it apart as being a very unique armor piece. The way that in which, if you didn't back it in the past, one of the things that I mentioned early on is that, you know, that was 7 years ago, a different studio. And while we are building those rewards, we will make those same rewards available in the cosmetic shop, as that is, you know, we still have to run a studio. We didn't benefit from, you know, those finances a long time ago, as that was in a different studio. So you will be able to buy these in the shop, and everyone who kickstarted and had it as a reward tier will have those automatically on their account. So they will not need to rebuy those. And later on in some of the rewards, they'll have more unique, like sigils or things like that, and we'll work through those. But these are base. And then skipping past the Duke to go to the next one, the King armor skin. Meant to be very regal. Really liked how our artist actually put a crown into the helmet as well. Just a very unique take on this type of armor set. Not one that I've really seen anywhere else when you think of a King armor set. The cloak, very regal versus the tattered cloak of like the Warlord. And it's, you know, the step up. You would expect the Duke to look this way as a representative, and, you know, King. So in the chat, you are suggesting that the icons on the cloaks could be tied to your guild, town, or whatnot. Does that mean pick from a set list, or you'll be making some custom for season winners or long-term loyal guilds? I believe that there's a lot of options on the table. We'll see what we get to technically. The system to support that in a performant way and the UI to support choosing that is not in place. We would like to get to an option where you can choose your, you know, icons, whether or not they are also surfaced as rewards through seasons. Those are all options that are on the table. So keeping that feedback as we get to those systems and share that we're developing those, absolutely. We'll see where we can go with that. To be honest, adding icons for seasons is one of the easier like asset creations. So I don't see why it wouldn't be, but you know, let's get there first and we'll take that feedback. I agree, it's a really deep red, a Fargo, and it's a very interesting armor set to look at. So now, you know, you can already start to see if you had a group of people with all of these different armors, you could have, you know, the cult side of your settlement, and someone as king, and you can role play out, you know, a little civilization over there. The other Kickstarter item that we started as it was, I think, the second on the list based off of how many people backed, was the Dragon Hatchling Pet. It is actually being renamed. As we looked at the old concepts and we began building, it actually is more of a Draco lizard. So we're working on the naming, and so the inspiration is taking from the real life Draco lizard and less from the dragons, as we think that we'll have a path forward on the dragon side that we can, you know, discuss at a later time. But as we've moved into game ready, we're still working on figuring out the wings. So you can see on the right, the wings haven't been updated, but you could see how it could start to look in the new style of the environment. and an NPC. But on the left, you can see an updated style on the wings to where these wings are glider wings instead of lift wings. And so they typically have a different pattern that you see in nature. So we wanted to kind of represent that. This is one of the 4 variations, as you could see in the concept art. This is without visual effects on this, and it's still very much a work in progress, but it's starting to become a reality where it had not been for so long. This would be a cosmetic pet. Spalletta is asking, if I remember correctly, you mentioned considering disabling skins in PvP areas to better allow a player to understand what kind of opponent he is facing. Is that still a direction? Yes. For us to survive as a studio in the modern day and have cosmetics in the game, one of the things that's really important for us in those PvP areas is that you are, what you wear, and that you can tell what someone else is. Whether or not it's, a multi-class scenario, you can still have some identity of what they're capable of. And so having a toggle to turn that off in areas that it matters would be important. That is our goal. So all of that would be summoned minions. We have had those in a good variety. In response to our Fargo, some of the pets. There is going to be a difference in pets that are cosmetic and through class abilities, in like a class in an archetype that has like summoning later on, those capabilities. And there may even be another ancillary system of like taming pets and things like that. We have not got to that point yet. We're getting our the foundational professions lined out, but there's always opportunity to expand in that direction in the future. So then what I wanted to do as well is actually show a little bit of, and you'll have to ignore the development console. So we're still very much working on quite a many things in this port, but actually run around a little bit in the new environment. So let me bring this up. Make sure it's actually showing. One of the things that we've really focused on in all of these updates is performance, and at the highest graphics on a good resolution, upscaling, shadows, everything on there. We've seen from the first Fracture Online to the new drastic improvements in frame rate. In this scenario, my character does not have any armor. I show a bunch of armor and then I run around on a character with no armor, of course. But the goal of this was to show that in this first biome, we're trying to keep it a very light, neutral environment, one that can kind of transition you between other biomes and other stronger identities. With that, we have spent a lot of time on giving it almost like a painterly look, a very comfortable look, and you'll start to see these new gatherable regions. While they're not turned into gatherables yet, we've been fitting them into the environment, but you'll start to see new versions of the gatherables to fit this style. Yeah, the terrain is looking quite a bit better, far less noisy, and we're able to see a lot more depth, more materials, allow us to have more flexibility in roads and routes, and the environment can really start to take shape over these next couple of months. Yeah, just wanted to spend a few minutes on our development server. The other thing too, well, I didn't put it in the list, is we've begun working with a UI artist. You've probably started to see, yesterday we started updating our logos and icons. We believe that Fractured Online needs to have kind of a facelift in some of these things. Newer logos to appeal to grab more of an audience, and helps just really carry on that fractured identity. We really love the new logo. I think that the sword in the middle really highlights the kind of the fractured word and theme. So we'd say that this is probably getting to our MVP of this biome, as it is showing, the trees, the species of different trees that, most fit in this. We're not done with it by any means, but hopefully it gives you a little bit of a taste of the direction that we are going for visually. And not just like naked characters running around a bunch. That can happen in different settlements, but that it's very much a smooth environment style. So then another area that's really important to the immersiveness of videos, or of environments, is sound. And I actually will have to put my earphones on, but I wanted to show a little bit on audio. So because we were going with the procedural world, the ability to create dynamic, immersive areas can happen anywhere and may happen at the same place every time, may happen at different times in different areas. And so we wanted to have flexible terrains, flexible worlds. And with that, we needed flexible audio. And so we're working with a composer around building out ambience for the different biomes and battle music that could be layered together to reduce the repetitive and like accentuate the dynamic that can happen. So before I start this, check chat. So it's the design going more cartoonish, not necessarily the right word, and I know it's just a test environment, but I worry now about the world just not feeling alive. I've been here since the start, and I'm hoping the best for the game. So it isn't going more cartoonish. It's actually been a very hard style to nail down. It is in the spectrum of realistic on one side and like very stylized, cartoony on the other. It's far more on the realistic side. And so when we talk about the world feeling alive, it's a combination of many layers to the world. When you look at the environment and you look at the foliage and the trees, those provide a foundation for the inhabitants, monsters, and like non-combat creatures like foxes and wolves. Those then layer on top. And then you have NPCs that layer on top of that. And you have players that then layer on top. And they may be building a house over in the corner. And you may have foxes running across. And it's near a settlement off on the side. And there could be an NPC caravan going down the road. All those layers stack together into what makes a world feel alive. But if you don't have a good foundation, then the world will feel empty no matter how many things you throw on top of it. And so if you were to have NPCs building anything or collecting anything or players collecting anything, they need that environment to respond to what's happening. So this particular showing was just the MVP of one of the biomes, and the next 4 are being worked on in order. So as those complete, then we can move on to more polishing of those. As these other systems come online, like new behavioral systems for the AI, for the NPCs and the monsters, all of that, you'll start to see interesting things that we can do there that make that world feel alive and have monsters and their families have identities. So I would just say stick with this as we're redesigning these things, because we can get a lot better in the future. I've spent a lot of time on different NPC and behavioral systems. And I think that we have, I know Andre, our lead designer, is very interested in redesigning the AI systems. So, well, thanks for staying around. We definitely do care about the game. I have invested a significant amount of my own money to get us over that relaunch line. And we're really depending on providing the community with a game that they want to live in. And so making that world feel alive is very important. So keep that feedback and pass it over to us. If as we layer these things on, you're not feeling that the world is alive, then let us know. Hop into Discord. I'm also working a lot on expanding out on how we communicate with everyone else. Not everyone uses Discord. Some use Reddit, some use other social platforms, and we haven't been as good on that. We're working on getting better. But we're always in Discord, religiously. So a little bit on the audio, it's kind of taking a step back into what makes the world feel alive is, in my opinion, is having audio that reacts to the environment, to the situation that your character is running in. So it's actually kind of a perfectly timed question, but this is one of the areas. And so we're spending, make sure I don't play too loud. Let me know if it's too loud, but I wanted to show where our kind of mind's at in working with this composer. And I'm not saying this is nailing down the ambience of this biome that I was just showing just yet. It's a work in progress, but we believe that the framework is there that we can replicate to other biomes. We just may add in other instruments. So I was clicking on the stream. What we have here is that you can have a base set of layers, and we can adjust the mood in those. And it can start to bring in other instruments into this, so that as you're running around the world, we can dynamically react to the situation that you're in. Sometimes you may just be traveling and you want something to be lower. And sometimes it may not be a battle, but you may be running with a few other people. There could be a situation in which it does feel a little bit more busy. And you may be getting near a dynamic point of interest that has, potentially a quest or, an NPC that there. So there's a lot of opportunity and reuse when we start to look at layering. So I'm turning it down just a bit. So that's one aspect of it. But we do have day-night. And so we'll let that end. We can actually begin to explore other instruments as well. Hopefully you're still able to hear me. I've kind of turned it down just a bit. So we can reduce that repetition that you sometimes have in repeating ambience. And so as we move up and explore different instruments at different times, it can feel a lot more intense just by adding in more layers. We can pull it back. And then as it shifts into nighttime, we can keep that same vibe, the same feeling, but by changing instruments, the night can have a different feel. And the same thing applies. We can make it feel more intense as we get through different instances in the world. And we can explore other layers too. And it gets really busy at this point, but it's kind of an exaggeration of being able to ramp things up. And then ramp it back down. A long time ago, I know some of you have been around if we've talked on some of these games. I'll turn this down a bit. But there was a time where you would run out into the world, and when you would come back to the village, in these old Japanese RPGs, you would come back to the village and blacksmith shops were closed. The noises that the town made and the soundtracks that you would hear in town just gave it that vibe, like the town is asleep. And we wanted to have the same capabilities in this. And the particular composer that we're working with is really good about pulling apart what makes that quote unquote vibe, and how can he really give us the controls to make that world feel alive and sometimes asleep. So each of the biomes we're working towards having its own identity through music, through visuals, and through the like monsters and capabilities of this dynamic system. So we're really excited that all these things can start coming together. But yeah, I mean that's really everything that we wanted to update. There's a lot going on, and it's crazy to think that this journey has been so busy. It's already July. Spalletta, yes, it will be. We're not really sure exactly where, because I'm working on a character creation idea for a soundtrack that we'll post to get some feedback on, but I think it'll be very interesting. So maybe, who knows, maybe at some point in the future you'll be able to, collect some scrap parts together and play music. We'll have some way that the old music is in. So we're about wrapping up. If there's any other questions, you can toss them in a chat for the next few minutes. Hop on our Discord. We have a channel for one for us collecting player feedback, and then another one for Ask the Devs. And we are pretty responsive. The problem with doing Q&As, whenever you answer all of the questions, is that your Q&A times don't really have that many questions. So we're doing more of recaps on questions that the communities ask. For this, if you did miss the first bit of this, we will do a recap log. This will also be up on YouTube, and we'll add it into the playlist for the developer updates. It's been great seeing everyone coming back to the community. I've talked with streamers, I've talked with just various other community members that have left and haven't even looked back, and a lot of them are very interested in seeing what Fracture Online could be, and we're happy to build that. So yes, the question is, the perks of original backers will still be available. Yes, we pretty soon are going to put out a discussion around our monetization plans. But if you've bought Fracture Online, if you've spent money, we're going to make sure that that goes forward. We don't want you to feel like you've lost anything other than your progression, because it is new servers, pretty much new game, new vibe. But other than that, if you've spent real money, we're honoring that. And then another question from a Fargo: how many characters will the relaunch let you have an account? We're figuring that out, and figuring out where that goes. So that will be part of the monetization discussion that we will have with the community. We'll hop on a live stream. We will put out the blog post, and we'll sit down with you guys and go over monetization and why we think this is the best, and collect that feedback. Part of that will be the amount of characters and how you can get more, what is the number, etc. So maybe one more minute and we'll wrap up. I know we're very excited at getting Fracture Online back up to where people can run around and begin testing these systems. Factions in our current design will not be race locked. I'm not saying the future that won't change, but to be honest, we haven't even really thought about that yet. Could be interesting. We have some recent changes around factions and how they play a role in the world. We're just not quite ready to show that just yet. So while factions won't be race locked, if you want to make your own group of eventually deer people, they actually have a name, but you're more than welcome to make a settlement of only that particular race. Those will be options for you guys to make those choices. Yeah, I play humans in all of my games, even back in Star Wars Galaxies. So I think we will go ahead and wrap it up. We'll still answer some questions in chat. Hop on our Discord. We will put this on YouTube and put a recap blog out as well. We will send a very lengthy recap newsletter as well, because the last two updates have had quite a bit of content. So thanks everyone for joining, and look forward to continuing to build Fractured Online with you guys. So thank you.